History of the Louvre Museum. A graded reader, Level A2. Chapter 1, The Stone Fortress. Our story begins in the year 1190. King Philippe Auguste was the King of France. At that time, Paris was a small city on the Seine River. The king wanted to protect the city from enemies. He decided to build a strong fortress next to the river. This fortress was the first Louvre. It was not a place for art or beauty. It was a place for soldiers and prisoners. The walls were very thick and the windows were very small. In the center, there was a big tower called a keep. It was dark and cold inside the stone walls. Today, visitors can still see the old foundations of this fortress. They are deep under the ground of the modern museum. The fortress was a symbol of power and defense for the young city of Paris. Chapter 2, A Home for a King. In the 14th century, Paris changed and the Louvre changed too. The city was now bigger and the old fortress was inside the new city walls. King Charles V did not want to live in the old palace in the center of the city. He wanted a home that was comfortable and beautiful. He looked at the old Louvre fortress. He decided to make it a royal residence. Workers added many big windows to let in the light. They built beautiful stairs and decorated the rooms with wood and gold. King Charles V loved books very much. He created a big library in one of the towers of the Louvre. He had almost 1,000 books, which was a lot at that time. The Louvre was no longer just a place for soldiers. It became a place of culture and luxury for the French kings. Chapter 3, The Renaissance Palace. In 1546, King François I decided to change the Louvre again. He did not like the old medieval style of the building. He wanted a modern palace in the new Renaissance style. He asked a famous architect named Pierre Lescot to help him. They destroyed parts of the old fortress to build something new. The new walls had many statues and beautiful decorations. François I was a very important king for the Louvre. He loved art and he was a friend of Leonardo da Vinci. Because of this friendship, the king bought the Mona Lisa. This was the beginning of the royal art collection. The king wanted the Louvre to show the power and the beauty of France. He spent a lot of money on the building and the paintings. The Louvre started to look like the palace we see today. Chapter 4, The Great Gallery. King Henri IV became the King of France in 1589. He had a very big plan for the Louvre. He wanted to connect the Louvre Palace to another palace called the Tuileries. To do this, he built the Grand Gallery. This was a very long corridor next to the Seine River. It was more than 400 meters long. At that time, it was the longest building of its kind in the world. But Henri IV did not just want a hallway for walking. He invited many artists, painters, and clockmakers to live and work in the Louvre. The palace became a center for the best artists in France. They lived under the Great Gallery in small apartments. The king protected the artists and gave them work. This was a very important step in the history of the Louvre. It showed that the palace was now a home for creativity and art. Chapter 5, The Sun King and Versailles. In the middle of the 17th century, King Louis XIV was the ruler of France. People called him the Sun King. He lived in the Louvre for many years. He built the famous colonnade on the east side of the palace. It was a grand wall with many tall columns. But Louis XIV did not like the busy and noisy city of Paris. He wanted a bigger and more quiet palace far from the crowds. He decided to move his court to Versailles in 1682. When the king left, the Louvre was empty for a short time. However, it did not stay empty for long. Many groups of artists and scientists moved into the palace. They used the big rooms for their meetings and their work. The Louvre was not a royal home anymore. It was now a place for the best minds in France to share ideas. The buildings were full of sculptures and drawings made by the artists living there. Chapter 6, A Museum for the People. The year 1789 was a time of big change in France. This was the start of the French Revolution. The people of France wanted more rights and they wanted to share the treasures of the country. Before the revolution, only the king and his friends could see the art in the Louvre. The new government had a different idea. They wanted to create a public museum for everyone. On August 10, 1793, the Louvre opened its doors as a museum. For the first time, ordinary people could walk through the grand halls. They could look at the paintings and the statues for free. In the beginning, the museum was open only 3 days a week. There were 537 paintings on the walls. Most of these paintings were from the king's private collection. The Louvre was no longer a symbol of the king's power. It was now a symbol of the nation and its history. Chapter 7: Napoleon and the Grand Museum. In the early 1800s, Napoleon Bonaparte became the Emperor of France. He loved the Louvre and he wanted it to be the greatest museum in the world. He changed the name of the museum to the Musée Napoleon. Napoleon was a great general and he traveled to many countries with his army. When he won battles in Italy, Egypt, and Germany, he took many pieces of art. He sent thousands of beautiful things back to the Louvre in Paris. Because of him, the museum became very large. He also built a new wing of the palace along the Rue de Rivoli. The Louvre became a place where you could see art from all over the world. However, after Napoleon lost his power, many of these treasures went back to their home countries. But the museum stayed very famous and very important. The building continued to grow during the 19th century under other leaders. The Louvre was finally a complete and giant palace of art. Chapter 8: The Pyramid and the Modern Museum. For many years, the Louvre looked the same. But in the 1980s, President François Mitterrand wanted to modernize the museum. He started a project called the Grand Louvre. The museum needed a new entrance because there were too many visitors. A famous architect named I.M. Pei designed a big pyramid made of glass and metal. At first, many people in Paris did not like the idea. They thought a modern pyramid did not belong in an old palace. But when the pyramid opened in 1989, people changed their minds. It was beautiful and it let a lot of light into the new underground entrance. Today, the pyramid is one of the most famous symbols of Paris. Under the ground, there are now shops, restaurants, and a large space for visitors. The museum is now very easy to visit. It has more than 35,000 objects on display. The Louvre is a mix of the very old and the very new. The end.